The 4 documents that you sent? Is that what you?
Yes.
Yeah.
We actually proposed this meeting before we even knew about that study that was done. So it was kind of done without City of Lewis knowing anything about it. Andrew, I don't know whether you got a copy of that too. I didn't think to send that to you.
I did. I assume, Jen, I assume it's the same one that's on the agenda. There's a link that had the feasibility study on.
Yes, yes.
site.
Okay, so you had access to it. Great. So it was a lot.
And indeed, through there, the public should be able to access and review it as well.
Good. I don't know what happened to Rodney, because he's the one that I cleared the date with first, because he's still working. So his schedule is a little bit more complicated than ours are, I would think. But anyway, the way let me just kind of start before he hops on, because he doesn't really need to. He knows all about this. We decided, because there was so much interest in pickleball and realized the need for additional facilities, that we should at least be a part of trying to either promote or locate additional facilities, because obviously this sport is going to continue to grow and our population is going to continue to grow. So the needs will obviously get greater and greater. So, and we all know that we can't really satisfy all those needs for pickleball at one small park that has two tennis courts. So that's why Rodney and I proposed, hey, why don't we create a group to investigate the possibility of building additional facilities and also assess how great the need is. So that's kind of how we came up with it. Did you get a hold of?
Yes, I did. He's going up right now to his office, and he'll join us. He got tied up with something at home, but Janelle, I've asked Rodney that if he can't find the email, that he just come in through the agenda and you would promote him again, Rodney Robinson.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So anyway, that's kind of how the committee started, and I think there's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. Is number one, in a lot of cases, there's a region-wide need for pickleball courts, obviously, because people all over the state are concerned about playing pickleball. But we also have to recognize the limitations that the City of Lewis has in terms of building its own facilities or creating its own facilities. That being said, I really think we need to look at the whole issue, and I think a lot of the work's done through this recent pickleball study, and then identify maybe some additional places where pickleball courts might be built, and then also identify any resources that the state or other organizations might have in order to assist in this endeavor. So that's kind of the purpose of the committee, and kind of how I see is. Anybody have any comments or questions about kind of what we see our charge is as a group?
Pretty clear.
Okay. What I'd like to do is go through the study that was done, and get any of your comments on locations or any of the details on that. Do people have that in front of them, or can they pull that up?
Is this a 119-page one, or is it the one that's the first?
119 pages. I didn't see that one.
That's the one I'm referring to as well, the one that was on the site.
Yeah, well, I have it on my iPad here. It's 119 pages. It says feasibility study. So, are you referring to this one? This is the site evaluation results. Is this one, Barry? Which one is it?
It's like 3 documents.
Yeah, well, there were 4. I got 4.
Yeah,
2
3 or
were-
4. Yeah.
One was a summary, but there was one that was a feasibility, and it's 119 pages. And then there's this other one, the summary of meetings 1 and 2, site evaluation. They talk about the 3 places that might be feasible.
Right.
Is that the one you mean? Or the 119-page one?
No, not the 119 page one.
Okay. Well, okay, that's yeah, there are a lot of statistics in there that I guess we don't need to know.
There was a lot of information in that.
Right. Well, I think the one has information on the current needs and all that kind of stuff, you know. Well, we can start by, let me just pull up the ones that I have and I sent.
I got one email that had 4 different documents that I could take a look at. Is that the one? I hope that's what you're.
Yeah, 3 or 4, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
One was the update. Well, there's one that has the market analysis and so on. Is that the one that's 119 pages?
Well, there's a summary.
Actually, the summary of the meeting, a summary of meetings 1 and 2. Let's take a look. Can we take a look at that first?
Okay.
Because that gives the market analysis, the site options, and preferred sites.
Right.
And there's a lot of pictures and stuff with it too,
Yeah.
which is helpful.
Very helpful.
Yeah, that
I
one's
might be.
48 pages.
Does everybody have that? Can everybody look at that at the same time?
Can you do it, would it be helpful to do a screen share?
Let me see if I can do that.
I think so, just for also the folks who are attendees to be able to see
Right,
it as well.
Let me
Yeah.
let me see
I
if
think that would be helpful.
let me see if I can do that. Is this it? Hang on 1 second. Okay. See if I can do screen share. Okay, screen share. Let me see. Host disabled participant screen sharing. So somebody's got to give me access to screen sharing. There's Rodney.
All right, let me see if I can do it.
Technology is great when you understand it and it works.
All right. Oh, I just got a notice that the host disabled participant screen sharing.
Maybe Janelle, are you able to?
Janelle, can you let
Element.
me do a screen?
I'm working on it.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Hey, Rodney, you're muted. We can't hear you because you're muted, Rodney. Can you hear us? There
I'm
you go.
ready. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I apologize for being late.
That's all right. what we're trying to do, I just kind of did an overview with the committee members. Dave Beck couldn't join us, about kind of what we felt our charge was and why we kind of created the meeting. The committee, we're trying to screen share the part of the feasibility study so we can all look at it at the same time. So Janelle is working on that as we speak right now. Is there anything that you kind of wanted to add, Rodney, say to the group, in terms of how you see this group operating?
Well, in terms of operation, I think we wanted to get a group together from Lewis, people in Lewis, to talk about what Lewis could do, the city and the Parks and Recreation, to be more accommodating to the growing pickleball community, and to find out specifically if there's an area where we could have pickleball courts available to people. And when Barry and I first talked about doing this through the Parks and Recreation Commission, we weren't, at least I wasn't aware that the state had made a major effort. And I see by the report prepared by WRT, which is a planning firm out of Philadelphia, which actually 25 or 30 years ago, I was an associate there. So they're a good firm, I can tell you. That they did this rather comprehensive study and looked at places within the county that would be a good major facility for pickleball, which I think is a terrific idea. Nonetheless, I think we ought to be looking in Lewis for where we can have pickleball courts, not of the size, in my view, to hold a tournament, but where people can go and conveniently, and I know it's a very social sport, so the requirements are different than you would have for, say, tennis or any of the other basketball or something like that. So it kind of requires a special site, and I think that's what I'd like to focus on looking at and trying to find and come up with a site or a number of sites that might be appropriate, so that we as a committee could go back to the city and say, here are some facilities that would accommodate pickleball. And in order to do that, at some point, we're going to have to determine as a committee what I would call a program. I'm a landscape architect, and when we do master planning or plans for parks and things, and I know Barry's comes from a parks background, you've got to develop a program, and that is what is it you're trying to accommodate before you even look for a site. How many courts? What's the parking requirement? Is there seating? All of those things. So I'm going on and on, but anyway, my thought was to see if we couldn't find a place in the city of Lewis that could accommodate the residents of Lewis primarily.
That would be ideal, Rodney.
I think so, and I think we should do it. I really think we should.
That would be great.
I'm not a pickleball player, by the way. I used to play a lot of tennis, but my knees gave out. So
take up pickleball.
Yeah, I guess.
That's why it started, right?
Right.
That's right. Of the body.
How are we doing, Janelle, on the?
You want to try it now, please?
Try to share my screen. All right, let's see. It still says disabled.
Mine does as well.
Can we, trying to think how to do this.
It says Barry's the host now. Mine just
Yeah, he
came
should
up
be
on
good
there.
now.
Yep.
I hit share screen. Oh. Now I got something up here, but let's see if I share. Open preferences. Files, basic. No. I apologize. I should have. Let me see.
Hey, this is Richard Glasser. Can you guys hear me?
I
And
can.
see you.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
just figured out how to undo my mute. So I've been watching, but I haven't been able to say.
Barry, when you clicked share, did it come up with different options like screen, files,
Yeah.
site, like that?
Yeah.
So you got to click on one of those. It's typically best just to choose share my screen, and then you have to hit share again.
It says share my computer sound, optimize my share screen video clip. Google
Or you can
Drive.
send the items to me, make me the host again, and then I can share the screen.
Let's do that. Let me see if I can pull that up. This is open. Allow Zoom to share your screen. Open system preferences. Wait a minute. Maybe that'll work. All right. I'll just send it to Janelle. Janelle, what's your email then?
jcornwell@ci.lewis.de.us.
J Cornwell at what?
ci.lewis.de.us.
All right. I'll send you all the documents.
Perfect. And then upward in your screen, you should have 3 little dots in a blue in the upper right-hand corner of your picture.
3, yeah.
Yeah, I need you to click there,
Okay.
and then you should have an option to make me the host again.
It says spotlight everyone, rename. No, it's not. I don't see anything like that. It says mute my video, stop my video, pin, spotlight. I'm not sure how to do this. Did you get the email then, Janelle?
I did.
So am I currently the host, or how's
Yes.
that work? So I don't know how to change the host.
Okay, and your email did not include the attachments.
It didn't?
No, you forwarded them to me, but they did not include the attachments.
I'm wondering if we should reschedule when we had this technology thing so that we can all look at because I apologize for not having this together.
And I'm looking at the agenda.
Uh-huh.
The first 3 items are introduced committee, purpose of the committee, and formulate.
Rodney, we're not understanding a thing you're saying. Sounds like somebody's singing.
Supporting
Speaking Welsh.
you're trying to bring up. People are frozen.
Frozen.
I'm
Some,
sorry,
Rodney.
I just missed all that. I'm frozen.
Rodney, if you want, why don't you turn off your camera because your bandwidth, it doesn't sound like your audio is working well with your bandwidth.
I'm glad we have somebody that understands technology here.
Turn off my camera.
Well, now we can hear you fine. Go
I
ahead.
had my cell phone on. I'm sorry, I had my cell phone on.
Okay.
I will turn that off. How's that?
We didn't hear that whole last thing that you said. It was
Well,
sounded like a song.
I was saying that on the agenda, the first 3 items to introduce purpose of the committee and formulate the goals of the committee. Do we have to have this document you're trying to bring up in order to do that? Could we at least get that accomplished?
No, we can do that.
And then maybe before we proceed to item 4, which was review, I just lost it, locations or something. That
Local and regional needs, yeah.
No. So how far can we get with that? Because I know it's difficult to get everybody together. I hate to kind of waste the opportunity.
No, you're right. You're right. So do we want to write down a few or come up with a few goals for the group so that we know kind of what our beginning and our end is, you know, so that once we've accomplished certain things, then we're at the point where we can either present or make suggestions to the Recreation and Parks Commission that will potentially be handed over to the City Council.
It seems to me that, you know, we have this committee with local pickleball people representing the Lewis pickleball community. I'd like to hear from you all. I mean, how many courts do you think would be appropriate here? I mean, are we talking about 2, 4, 10 courts? I have no idea. And I think that's a very good place to start. And then from there, we could begin to develop an idea of, you know, formulate. I mean, that's getting into the programming. So I think in terms of programming, let me just back up. I'm talking too much, but let me just back up. In terms of moving forward, I think the first thing we need to do is do some programming to figure out what it is we're trying to provide for the community in terms of courts. And
I mean, the feasibility study talks about 16, 20 courts. That's way beyond, I think.
That's like on a county level, isn't it? I mean, you all tell me. Am I wrong about that?
Well, aren't those courts used for tournaments primarily, though? You have to have, what, a minimum of 12 courts for tournaments? We don't need that here necessarily.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that. Yeah.
I've played at the Canal, and I think we've had 6 courts going, but they're not dedicated courts. You know?
Right.
But I've seen 6 full courts, so maybe that's a minimum. I'm just throwing out a number.
Mm-hmm.
12 seems very excessive, perhaps, but 6 is a nice number. I don't know.
Rodney's approach is sensible though, because the size will determine where you can then place it, and then also the budget and those things, which will also be
and
important.
the parking. How many people will be playing, and what kind of parking can we anticipate? We have to go through all of that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So 6 courts. How do you all feel about that?
Can you all hear me? This is Richard Glasser.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah, okay,
too.
good. I just wanted to make sure it was still working. Yeah, I think we have to start with, you know, what the goal is. If this is just to make, you know, some courts that's going to satisfy the local needs for the, you know, the citizens of Lewis, and we don't plan on having a bunch of money coming in from county and private and other public sources, because if that's the case, you know, and it's looked at as a business deal that's going to bring businesses and people to Lewis, then yeah, you look at those big tournament size 16, 20, 24 courts. But as you saw in those proposals, you're talking about big money. You're talking about $20 million, $15 million. So if we're just looking at satisfying the needs of the pickleball players that I play with, you know, down at the Canal Park and at some of the private clubs around, I think 6 to 8 courts would be, you know, very sufficient, and, you know, would also be big enough if we do it right to draw people in from outside. But you can't really hold tournaments at courts, you know, that size of a facility.
Mhm.
Richard,
And I don't
or
think our goal is to provide a facility like that. It's more, to me, it's more of a local recreational need. And when I say local, I mean kind of greater Lewis, whatever that might be.
I agree. I looked at those studies, and there's some, I mean, there's an enormous amount of information in there. It's very interesting. And I from reading on all of that, I didn't know where we were starting from as a committee. And I think this is good to clarify it. So I'm on the same page, local and, you know, somewhere around 6 to 8 courts.
question I have for the pickleball players is, do you have a way of communicating broadly with your Lewis group of pickleball players to get sort of their inputs, or do you have a good sense of sort of the general feeling of, again, size and need on this?
I do. I'm literally playing 4 or 5 days a week, and talking with probably 30 to 50 different members on a weekly basis. So yes, we get a lot of feedback, and I think that's generally, no one's looking for a big spectacular, you know, draw people in from all over the state. They're just looking for a nice facility that we can play in locally.
Thanks, Richard.
Now, may I ask somebody, I was reading through the site evaluations, and they're all in the county, 2 off Route 1 and 1 up Route 9. Is it possible to keep it in the city of Lewis? Is that feasible? Like, has anybody considered State Hennepin State Park? Is that possible? There's a lot of land there. Is it possible to put something there?
I think that was one of the sites that was originally considered, and for some reason that was eliminated.
Yeah, I wonder why. I saw no reference to it in any of these documents, so just curious.
I would think that one issue is park entrance fees and being able to, but I don't know. I think you could get around that or work something out with that. I mean, there actually were existing tennis courts there that are in total disrepair and not being used towards the beach, the public beach. But
because it'd be nice to have bathrooms. I don't know the whole facility, but bathrooms and parking and space. So I was just curious what became of that idea.
That's a great question. It probably has to do with the state Parks and Recreation, DENREC, making a decision of what is that park for, and do they want to open the door to have all kinds of other active recreations in that park? Because once they let one group in, then they will feel a need to accommodate other groups someplace. It could fill up very quickly. I'm just thinking out loud and putting myself in their position. But I think, Ariane, is that your name?
Ariana, yes.
Ariana, I think that's a great question. And I think maybe if we could talk to somebody at DENREC or at the Parks and Recreation and just get a reading, because I anticipate that question will come up again and again and again. And you're right, it's
here.
It's obviously missing from the reports that the state did for some reason. So they must have ruled it out. So we ought to know about it. We ought to be aware.
But who knows? There may be, you know, parts of that park that don't require you to go in the entrance gate that would be available, you know, like across the road from the ferry terminal. That's all state park land, but, you know. But
if you're going to the beach, it's a whole different area of the park than going to a recreational area.
Yes.
I mean, the beach areas, as we know, get very crowded. But if you're going elsewhere in the park,
you're right.
I don't think it'd make any difference.
Does anybody know, was it ever considered I think we have what, 3 baseball fields down there in the park on the canal.
Oh,
And I don't know how often they are used, but it would seem to me that if one of those baseball fields could be converted to a pickleball facility and just keep the tennis courts as they are, you could easily fit 6 courts on a night. You wouldn't even need a whole baseball field.
I like
I don't
your-
know. Has that ever been proposed?
That land is actually owned by the Orton family. So they
Oh.
actually simply lease it or, allow this Little League to use it. So it's
So
not really city land as such.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's all, excuse me, that's all private land?
Yeah.
That's right.
It's kind of a weird
Hmm.
arrangement, isn't it, Andrew, with the Little
they just,
League? And-
Yeah, the family just allowed the Little League to use it really at no charge for the last 60 years, I guess.
Yeah, because I can tell you from the group that the ideal situation obviously would be to have that facility at Canal Park, because everybody just loves the setting and it's
Sure.
convenient
Sure.
to people and brings a little business into town if you want to go to lunch or get coffee, things like that.
You're right.
But, I mean, the space is limited. I mean,
It is. That's why I was asking about the baseball fields. I didn't know what that arrangement was.
no.
That doesn't mean it's an impossibility. It's just a
No.
different ask. It's just a different arrangement.
Do you know them, Andrew? Do you know the family?
Actually, Robbie Orton's my cousin, so I did. Yeah.
Oh,
That's why you're
that's
so nice
right.
about it.
we have an inside track here. Maybe
Yeah,
talk to them or something like that.
that's quite a kind thing that they've done.
Yes, absolutely. But maybe it could be reevaluated. I mean, I don't see a lot of baseball there. Maybe I'm totally out of it, but
Well, the thing is, so now to your point around tournaments, they've installed some new lights, which would now avail them of hosting like all Little League All-Star games, which previously I think the lighting was insufficient there or something.
Yeah, that would be kind
But
of.
I'll bring it up to Robbie. How about that? See.
Thank you very much.
What's her last name, Andrew?
Orton, Orton,
Gortn?
Orton.
Oh, okay.
I think one other question I would want to have answered is how far from the center of town do we want to locate facilities? I mean, the city of Lewis is only so big, but I mean, and would it have to be necessarily within the city limits? Maybe there's, some state land that could be used that are, not right in town or at the edge of town, or I always think of facilities like this being near more people and also large enough so that you can either potentially build restroom facilities and or parking lots. You may have enough space to build the courts, but if you don't have, well, that's another part of developing the program is in addition to 6 or 8 tennis pickleball courts, how much other space do you need and what other facilities really would be required if you located something like that? If you locate it adjacent to a park or that has facilities, maybe, I mean, I don't know how much land's over at the library, but who knows? And I know they were talking about a children's garden behind the facility, but there you have parking, you've got bathroom facilities that, may not be right adjacent to the courts, but, it half of it's done. So, I mean, that's another thing that we could think about too.
I think one thing that's important with regard to the parks is to keep in mind the original purposes and integrity of the parks and the use of the parks. So not saying that it's totally out of the question to be able to move into another park, but how does that fit with the scope and purpose of the parks? I think that that's an important thing to keep in mind as we look at space.
Yes.
Hey, Barry, out here in the Great Marsh, is there any land out here? Barry knows where I mean, out here in the
Mhm.
Great Marsh area. Is there anything that could be a pickleball area?
That's certainly something that could be considered in a master plan. Rodney and I are
Okay.
in charge with developing that, because they're, I mean,
There's a lot of
Apart-
space, but I don't know who it belongs to.
well, we have 66 acres basically. Basically, both sides of the road, as you come in off of Park Road, and then all the way to what I call the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
About 7 acres is dog park, but there certainly is a possibility, on either side of the road to do something like that.
It was just an idea since it is City of Lewis.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
Good idea. And I think to Rodney's point before, I think the challenge there would be to where does that then fit in if the Great Marsh Park with the larger plan of where you plan to put other things within the park. But yeah, I think it's an idea worth exploring.
There was a survey done last year before I started in the position on the community's general purpose, what they saw, what they preferred for the purpose of the park, active versus passive recreational opportunities. And I'd have to look at the data again, but I think it was overwhelmingly more passive recreation, so walking trails, overlooks for wildlife, that sort of thing. I mean, it's certainly still feasible, but they did do an interest survey. And again, that would be something to keep in mind. I think, Barry, you mentioned the master plan. And I think that if we're starting to look at opportunities, that master plan is going to be very, very important. We've put 2 things in that park, the community garden and the dog park, without having that overall master plan. So if we're going to consider Great Marsh Park, I think we need to take a step back and get that master plan first. So that will certainly take some time.
Is there a copy of that, Janet, that we could see also, this master plan for the marsh?
We don't have it yet.
Oh, I see. Okay. I missed
That's what we have to
Yeah,
develop. So it involves walking the perimeter, and Barry and Rodney and Marty Thompson, who's our tree commissioner, have tried to find a mutually agreeable time, and we know how hard that can be because we had some difficulty with our meeting. But that part of it is walking around the perimeter of the park, looking at the native species of trees and plants, and looking at the space, taking into consideration what the public wants for it. And I'm sure Barry and Rodney can talk at much greater detail about the master plan. But I think that we have to focus on that before we try to do anything else in that particular park.
That's a good point. And I was involved in the dog park, where those people came to me and asked me to help them with that. And I remember when we first presented a plan to City Council, I guess it was a few years ago, there were also people there who wanted soccer fields and other kinds of active recreation that required large areas and large spaces. So I know those people haven't gone away; they're still there, and so there's going to be some demand for a variety of things, and that all is along with the people who, and I've heard this from people, we've heard it in our Parks and Recreation Commission meeting, let's just leave it as a natural area and manage it properly. And because we're losing natural areas, especially the margin, the Great Marsh is a wonderful natural resource. Do we want to load it up on that one last remaining open space, which is owned by the state, but long-term lease to the city, which means that my understanding was anything that you want to do in there, you have to do a master plan and go to the state and get some approval by the state. So it's a lengthy process, review process to get everything done over there.
We have a comment in the chat from Anne Reed. She states, I think that the committee should stick with venues in town, not the state park. Great Marsh Park, I supposed to include active recreation. There is land by the library, etc. So the things that we've been talking about, but her comment is that she feels we should stay within the venues of the town.
Well, before we've jumped in very quickly to talking about possible sites, if we could go back just a minute, and what I've got is a general consensus of 6 to 8 courts would be appropriate. How many people are we talking about in terms of parking spaces? What do you think that would be? I mean, if you loaded them up and you have 4 people per, that's an absolute maximum. Do we need to provide that many parking spaces, or could it be something less than that? What are your thoughts, pickleball players?
Well, you need a parking space for every person. That's how I look at it. And
Okay.
sometimes there are spectators, there are people waiting to get on the courts. So then you have extra people, not during COVID, obviously, that's a lot.
Right.
But there were a lot of people down at the canal who were just waiting to get on. So it wasn't just the 24 people playing. It was much more.
And to that point, Ariana, what would like an ideal seating situation be from a bench standpoint? Inside the court, outside the court? How's that typical arrangement?
Yeah. Well, Richard, down at the canal, there's only like one bench on the side. It's very limited. Right. People would bring their own chairs actually because it was so limited. So more seating would be better than what's provided right now. It's very limited now.
And would it be better than just benches, having tables and tables with benches?
Table, but I don't think table.
Well, that's what they have out at Sand Hill. They have a little covered place with a couple tables in there. But either that or when in some of the places you play indoors, like Sports at the Beach, they just have an aluminum 4-high bleacher that you could sit 40 people if you want.
Okay.
Something as simple as that. But I agree that we need, most people will drive alone to go play. So if you had, the maximum would probably be, 4/8 is 32 and some other people waiting, maybe, parking for up to 40 cars, even though I'll ride my bike a lot over to the park and people that do local do the same thing, but that majority would drive single.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've heard the Lewis Auto Mall over there is up for sale. That'd be an ideal property.
Oh, really?
It's already got a base paved there. You got stone laid down.
That's outside of town, but
for now.
In my mind, I mean, I don't think we're wedded to within the city limits, as long as we can satisfy the needs for access and close proximity to town. I think
I would agree. As a Lewis resident, that my dread is having to go out of Lewis to Route 1, hit all the traffic, and have to
right.
As long as I don't have to go to Route 1, I'm happy.
I think we're all like that. We don't want to go up on the highway.
Can I ask somebody? I know this came up at a meeting, Barry. Why the high school tennis courts can't be shared? Because in some of these materials you sent us, the state of Massachusetts, it was some city in Massachusetts that shared high school tennis courts with the pickleball players. Why won't they do that here?
Well, they should be. I mean, I come
Public is-
originally from Baltimore County, and the Baltimore County schools and the Baltimore County Rec Department work hand in hand, and every school is considered a school recreation center. And as soon as it's 3:30, 4 o'clock, recreation park takes over. I would like to see more cooperation with the school district, because I get a little upset when a school official tells me I can't use
Public
facilities that I paid for,
Yeah.
So I do think that we could coordinate a little more. I think
I have
part of the
some insight
problem-
on that. So I have a gentleman who lives on my street, and he's probably his early 70s, and he goes up to Milford to play tennis. And the reason he doesn't play tennis at Cape Henlopen is simply because what we were talking about with the benches, it's when it's not his turn to play, there's nowhere really to sit at Cape Henlopen. So they actually drive up to Milford and play. And to Barry's point, there's some cooperation with the school district. So that's a good exploration point too, especially with the building of the new middle school that's coming up, because presumably at middle school they may have these types of courts that could be worked into the rotation.
But they should be dedicated pickleball. I mean, that's the problem down at the canal. They're not dedicated pickleball. You either put up, temporary nets, or you share the tennis court, and that's not the idea. I think we're talking about dedicated pickleball here, aren't we? Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I recall, when we had a commissioners meeting and someone from the tennis association came, they said that when I could be wrong about this, but I think she said that when they had competitive tennis tournaments, that the courts cannot be double striped. They
Right.
need to be
Ann
striped.
Reed just made that point in the chat. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're right, Rodney.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Yep.
But do they have room for dedicated pickleball also at Cape Henlopen High School? Maybe
Well,
there's
plenty of land there. That's a good point.
and there are, I guess, the restroom. There's parking. Is it city? I guess it's City of Lewis. I'm not sure. Is it tech? Doesn't matter. It's really near the City of Lewis.
Right.
But there are a lot of young people too that play pickleball. They're really good. If they're good athletes, they pick it up immediately.
Sure.
So maybe it's something for even the high school kids that would enjoy it. I love tennis, but I stopped that years ago and went to pickleball. But it just seems like I don't understand not sharing when it's a publicly taxpayer, area.
Well, and there's all that land behind the middle school. I don't know. There's a big football field there. I don't know how much that should. Maybe Andrew.
Well, that's the plan. So the Lewis School now will just go straight back instead of having the wings. So the large part of the school then will actually be in the existing parking lot, and then their athletic fields as such will be in those areas back there.
Okay.
So it looks like we have some ideas for the town, but we just don't within town, but need to be researched, I guess.
Right.
And looking again at the high school, I don't know.
Does anybody have an update on what were the decisions on the existing facility at Canal Park, and was there ever a decision on how they were going to fix up or change or divide up those courts that was agreed upon?
Yeah, we had a meeting with Charlie. When was that, Janelle? A couple months ago for the striping and such.
It's in October, I think.
Yeah, and we came up with a plan that basically eliminated the fact that balls would be going to the tennis court. So it's designed so that somebody could potentially play tennis and people could be playing pickleball at the same time. So it wouldn't be an either or situation.
So that would probably be on either side of the tennis net. On each tennis court, you would have a parallel, well, the tennis net would act as the divider between the courts on either side of that, and you'd do
Correct.
four of them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 tennis and.
Okay, I didn't know if it was ever finalized or agreed upon.
It just made the most sense.
I agree.
And we also made that decision based on safety concerns too.
Right. The only problem with that is obviously everybody has to bring their own net, which makes it a little more difficult for people that aren't regular fanatics to do it. But
Right.
that I understand the decision. That makes sense.
What other considerations do we have to come up with in terms of the program? We've got the size. We're talking about a parking lot of 25 to 30 spaces.
More than 25, I think.
It was up to 40.
Okay.
Yeah, 4/8. If you go maximum, 4/8 or 32, and then we add some extra for people waiting.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe 40 spaces is,
Okay.
if we can find that, that would be ideal. We have to have seating available. I think some shade in the seating would be appropriate. Is that a good thing?
Right.
I would think some either a awning type shade that would be temporary or a permanent kind of shelter, I guess.
Can we say that restrooms would be desirable, but they aren't essential?
They're kind of.
That would be correct, because like in Sand Hill now, they're just using porta-johns. And they have them out there because of the soccer tournaments also, but they're amazingly clean for what I used to remember a porta-john being like. But
and I've seen in many parks where they do an enclosure for the porta-johns, like a wooden enclosure, and they back the doors up to face away from area that you see, and they
There's
can
an example
be
of
pretty
that
nice.
at Cape Henlopen State Park. I think it's out by Herring Point. They've got an enclosure on
Yeah,
the,
exactly.
yeah,
And-
I know
and
exactly what you're talking about.
we're also considering fencing and wind screening, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, definitely can't do it without fencing. Balls would go everywhere.
Let me ask this, do you need to have potable water out there for wash down or doing something like that, or irrigation, or is that really not a non-essential element?
From my experience, most people bring their own drink bottle with, because they put they put their little vitamins in there and all of that. So I would say for most regular players, no, that's not a consideration.
Right, then let me bring this up. What about lighting? Would it be ideal to have nighttime play with lights available, or is that desirable but not essential?
I think it would greatly increase the usability, the usage of the courts, especially for working people that would play, later in the evening. I mean, this winter has been a great example. We've had some very mild weather, and we've been playing, all times of the day. And if we had lighting there would have been a lot of night play. So yeah, I don't think it's an absolute essential, but I think it would be a high priority.
Okay, because that affects neighbors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Trying to think if there's anything else that, my thought is that we ought to kind of put together, what I'd like to do is sit down with this information and come up with an acreage. We
Right.
need so many square feet, or, an acre or 2 or 5 or whatever it is, I don't know. And that'll help give us kind of a package that we're looking for sites that can accommodate. There's no sense in looking at sites if they're too small or too constrained in some way.
Right.
Good point, Rodney.
Yeah.
I
The
think
other-
I'm
What's
sure
that?
that information is somewhere in those studies. I saw a lot of things that have, we have all the dimensions of the court and how much area should be between the courts, and we can figure out how much, parking areas for 40 or 50 or whatever the cars would be. I think that would be a quick study, and we have that already.
Right.
I'd be glad to put that together from what we have.
Okay.
Okay.
The other thing that's obviously worth considering is because it will eventually go before council is the funding piece. You know, are the grants available? Is there some shared costs across, you know, state and maybe pickleball association and the city, et cetera? So what's the sort of concept of how it will
Some of the
paid
developers.
for? Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, that this kind of stuff ought to be help should be help. The help to fund this should be the Sussex County Recreation Department, which there is none.
Oh, oh, really? No money?
Well, I mean, in my mind, we've got tons of developers that are developed the entire county, and they're not contributing to any of the recreational needs of all the people that they're attracting to these areas. And I mean, that's another whole discussion. But in my mind, you know, again, I hate to say where I came from, but in Maryland, 1/2 of 1% of your real estate tax goes to a recreation and funding program called Program Open Space. And that's the reason why Maryland has such nice parks, is because as the land gets developed, more and more money goes into the fund to develop recreation and parks. I mean, right now, what we're doing is we're depending on the goodness of the developers to add a tennis court or a walking path, is about all they do, to their facilities, and maybe a swimming pool, and only the people in that community can use it. So, I mean, that's another whole discussion, but I would like to see, you know, resources from the state or county help in the funding of something like this.
Is it true that Mr. Lopez gave thousands of dollars out of his budget to the dog park? I had read that somewhere.
I have no knowledge of that.
That was, I think that was, I thought that was in the Cape Gazette.
I think he
if our representative
contributed to the planning of it. I mean, I think he contributed in some way, and
yeah, there was something about him giving out of his funds. I don't know what his budget was.
Right.
But if they have the flexibility, if our elected representatives have flexibility, you can hit them up maybe.
Yeah. We certainly could check that out.
Yeah, especially if they're local and, you know, play pickleball. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But apparently he gave money out of his funds. So that was very nice. And it's it's great for the people who have use that dog park. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my thought was that once we know the program for the facility and the size and so on, we can then generate a budget number, not an estimate, but a budget number for what it would cost to install something like this. And then you would match that to various sites, because sites have different development costs associated with them. Mm-hmm. So if we come up with 3 or 4 or 5 sites, I don't know, we could then come up with what we would estimate to be a reasonable budget for each one of these, because that's going to be, as Andrew said, that's going to be paramount with the city council to say, all right, so what is it going to cost? And you say, well, we put it in this location, we estimate it's going to require these kind of funds. And then let somebody else go take on the responsibility of finding the money. Right. And maybe that's reaching out and looking for, the dog park also had a lot of people who were, grassroots contributors to that, and put some money into it.
And do the same thing. Do the same thing with pickleball.
You could do the same thing.
Yeah.
But that to me that's a later step in the master planning process. You've got to figure it out, what it is you want, where it's going to go, kind of what it would look like, and then what the budget is going to be. Once you have those 3 things, then you can go out and start going through the process of getting permission to develop the land, and at the same time raising the funds to do it.
Well, it sounds like we've come up with sort of a program or specifications. Is there any other things that we need to consider in terms of what we need?
Can I ask though, Barry, are we ruling out, like there's 3 site evaluations that we have already discussed going on to Route 1? Are these being seriously considered, the 2 off Route 1 and the 1 up on Route 9? That was 150-page
We
document.
certainly, I think that's part of our discussion.
Oh, okay.
In my mind, I think we ought to, add additional sites to that based on, the program.
It just seems the consensus here is that we'd rather keep it closer to Lewis rather than, I don't want to go out Route 1.
No, I mean, in my mind, I don't see going on the other side of Route 1. I mean, to me, that's not Lewis
Yeah,
over there.
it's
Right.
not.
And when you read through those proposals, they were developed from a very high level, trying to draw as many people in from all over the state.
Sure.
Who are working on public transportation. And I think for our purposes that we're on a much lower level. We're more Lewis centric.
Yes.
I think we're all on that same page, Richard.
Okay, good.
I totally agree.
Well, do we want to then look at these other sites at our next meeting?
I have a question. If we were to, how do we go about, once we know what it is we want to have, the size, the numbers, the parking, and all of those things, then it's a pickleball facility looking for a home. How do we go about finding the home? Do we get city planning involved in that?
It's a good question.
In some way, or do we go look for, I mean, I don't know that it's be the most effective for us individually to go out and start approaching people. I think maybe if there's some other way within the city, if the city this is going to be a city facility, so how would the city go about finding land that was available for something if the city wanted to build a new facility for whatever?
Like if we come up with a site, who checks out whether that's even
Yeah, that's something that city planning gets involved in. I don't know the answer to that. I'm asking.
Andrew, you're muted.
I was going to ask Janelle if she had a comment on that
Yeah.
in terms of the process.
So I think at some point a feasibility study would have to be done. We'd probably have to work with the city engineer to determine whether or not, what needs to be done to the site. Does it actually fit everything? Because there's a lot of other components that go into developing a site, like stormwater management and life safety
Grading.
requirements and other things that we just have to make sure that if you find a site that it actually is feasible for what is proposed.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm even before that, Janelle, I'm saying if we're looking for sites, there may be sites available that we don't know of, that somebody in the city planner might have a real leg up on who owns it or what the possibilities are. And even if it's, say, the high school land, who would be able to find out the possibility of putting a facility there? I mean, is that in the scope of this committee to go out and approach landowners and find out where land or sites are available? Is that our job?
Good question. I don't like my example of the property on just past Hooling Cove, the Lewis Auto. Like, I don't see a reason why, as an individual on this committee, you couldn't approach an owner and say, "This is what we're thinking about." You would bring that back to the committee for discussion. The thing that you have to be worried about on the committees like this is the FOIA issues around.
Right.
If we then start having that conversation via email of, oh, this is what are your thoughts on this? Those conversations need to happen in a public forum. the exploration of the issues on your own individually, there's no issue there.
Okay.
And you could even say coordinate with Barry, because you don't have a quorum with just two of you. As soon as you involve a third person out of 5, you have a quorum, and it needs to be publicly sort of it's a public meeting at that point.
Right.
But yeah, you can certainly do due diligence, around that. The one thing I would consider with the school, you probably would also have to coordinate with the school board, I would imagine. They would have, that would be another layer, is probably getting on their agenda and proposing it as an idea, and then that coordination.
How do we know what parcels of land? It's kind of up a little bit. The city of Lewis was looking, this is another issue with parking, and there was some kind of land out on Schley or something that could be used for parking, which is I think that's a terrible place to put a parking lot, because it's kind of far to walk, but it could be utilized for something else. Is this city land that already exists that could be used for the recreation? I don't know, Janet, do you know anything about parcels of land the city already owns? So you wouldn't have to spend any money on getting the land, just on building the facility.
Yeah, I certainly don't know all of the parcels of land. Schley Avenue, there is that parking lot there. I think the parking committee may have even had conversations around that. Just the people don't know where all of the public parking is in the city of Lewis. And there are other, quote, municipal lots that are underutilized, I think, because they are kind of outside of the business district, so to speak. But I mean, certainly that's something that we can look into, and what the parcels of land are that might,
Because if they're being underutilized for parking, why not use it for something that's really useful, where people will drive to that area, not wanting to drive and then
I think that particular site is probably too small for what we
I think so too.
I haven't seen it. I don't know.
Yeah, I
Just
used to
heard of it.
live over there, so
It's back where BPW and the city maintenance buildings are, and it's not huge. I don't know that
at the end of Franklin.
Franklin,
it's-
yes, it
Yeah,
is.
and the hope therein is actually that the folks who work at the restaurants and things would actually use that lot, then freeing up parking for visitors closer to downtown. That's the hope. with
Then that's
that.
good. Thank you for
Yeah.
explaining that.
Now, the one thing that hasn't been discussed, which to Janet's point before around park usage and what their sort of purpose is, how about George H. Smith Park? Is that like right there by the bocce ball courts there? Is there enough to maybe put a pickleball court there? Because there is a small parking lot that is right there by the playground there. But to your point, Jan, I don't know if that's this park that's kind of set up as more passive recreation.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it would certainly be a conversation that would be worth having, just to say that we had the conversation and it doesn't fit with the purpose and the scope of the park. It's really more passive recreation, native plantings, so meadow gardens and whatnot. But I think, to be fully transparent and have on the record that we've had the discussions with the appropriate people about park usage, I think is a valuable discussion to have for the record, certainly.
Well, there's also land behind the school there too,
Mhm.
which I don't think anybody's ever, I don't know how much land there is, but it's just a field. There's not, and
Right.
again, you kind of already have parking there with the school, and I don't know what the Board of Education is using that for. It used to be the senior the seniors
Yeah,
education stuff. I think they've moved from that site, haven't they, Andrew? Do you
Yeah, it
know
used to
about
be
that?
like, I think you're right. It used to be the consortium.
Right.
I don't know if they're sure they're using that for administration, but yeah, you're right. They moved the consortium out. I think Hudson, near Hudson Road.
Right.
They are, or they are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that might be a site too.
Well, it would be helpful. Rodney has really, that was good information, Ronnie. How much land do you need to build these courts? I think you're right. That's where the first step. And
So
then-
based on our specs right now, can we come up with an acreage? Rodney, I mean, you're the landscape architect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna do it right now, but
No.
you know,
No, I didn't.
wait a minute.
No, I didn't mean to suggest that.
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
just saying, do we have enough information?
I think
Agree.
so. Oh, yeah. And I think Richard made the point. It's already been done in those reports. We can look at those reports, and from that, you know, but the acreage is not. It's not just a square. It might be a rectangle. It might be, you know, a parking lot. You need 2020. You need at least 60 feet from end to end to double load a parking lot. So there are certain dimensional requirements that you'd have to have, and so yeah, I'd be happy to come up with you know, just a sketch or sketches that would say, this is how we could accommodate 8 courts and 40 parking spaces and waiting areas and set and so on and so on. And that'll give us an envelope. What we want is a couple of envelopes and the acreage size, and then that'll help us fit them into any potential site.
Right, because you can put those little boxes and squares any way you want. In a line, you could put them in a square, you could put them
Sure.
in
Yeah,
rectangle.
well, let me ask you this. Not being a pickleball player, I know in tennis you want to be concerned about rising and setting suns in your eye, and so you want to have. Ideally, it seems to me you'd want the courts to the nets to go east and west, so the courts are north and south, so you don't have a setting sun. Is that
Same thing. Same thing.
Okay.
Yep. Lots of lobs, you know, all that kind of thing. And obviously the land is key because there's enough information in those reports depending on the site. You know, a court's going to cost anywhere from the low end of 40 grand each to 60 grand each, depending on whether you're doing it on asphalt or concrete and what the base is and all that. So we've got a pretty good idea that 8 courts is going to be somewhere, just call it 400,000 plus another 100,000 for the, you know, the bleachers, fences, stuff like that. So, but the land, I mean, could be 10 times that if we had to buy it.
Right.
So the land is really the key thing.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we have enough information to at least come up with the acreage, and then I think we can then entertain different sites or come up with possible sites. So I would suggest that that we come up with the acreage, and I certainly can help Rodney do that until the next meeting, and then we can review the sites that were already proposed in the original feasibility study and see if any of those would be suitable, and then look at additional sites. How does that
And
sound?
if anyone has the time or the inkling, my kids are actually playing soccer out at Sand Hill, and there's a pickleball facility out there, sort of similar scale that we're talking about in terms of the number of courts.
Oh,
So it might be worth going out there and having a look at that. It's very nice. It's very well done. And to Richard's point, in this orientation,
School, Sand Hill?
Sand Hill, it's right where near the Georgetown Airport. So instead of turning left to go to the airport, at that all-court kind of intersection there, you'd actually take a right,
Okay.
and it's about a quarter mile on your left once you're on
Okay.
Sand Hill from there.
Right past courts at the beach.
Yep.
They
Okay.
have, I think they have 6 courts there. The only thing there is the orientation is not
Right.
ideal because the morning sun's right, you know, in your eyes if you're on the one side. They only put half side screens up about 5 foot high, so they don't have any wind protection. But it's a nice facility for the budget they had, I think.
Mhm.
I think it would give a good idea of size. Don't you agree, Richard, in terms of the potential requirement for size? And like to your point, though, you could orient different ways, but it's got 6 courts there, and the parking probably similar, like probably right there at the immediate area where the courts are, probably 40, 50 spots right there. So
Good.
Thank you.
All right, I'll take it on as an assignment to come up with a plan or an envelope that we can, or a couple of versions, so we can know what the acreage is and how we could, the dimensional requirements and so on for our next meeting. And I'll share it with you, Barry. Barry and I can do that together.
Sure.
And the other thing before we leave, because what I'd like to do is rather than share that with something at the meeting, I think it would be better if once we get it done, we could distribute it among this committee.
So you can. So what I was referring to in the FOIA is you can send that around to the group. Just say, do not reply all. Just say for information only for discussion at our next meeting. That way we don't get involved in a discussion, but you can certainly share
Right.
the information in that manner, distributing it that way.
Okay.
Just don't comment until we're in this forum.
Okay, that's fair. So do we have a directory for this? Can somebody put together a directory with everybody's name and phone number and email address and all that?
I can do that if you'd like. I think I have everybody's. I don't have phone numbers per se, but I will reach out to everybody via email and we'll get that information and then I'll put it out to the group.
Perfect.
That'll work.
Okay.
Great. What about next meeting? We're starting to get into the holidays. Do we want to look at January?
Maybe a good idea.
Not before. Come on.
Getting too crazy? I think everybody has their Christmas stuff up. They put it up before Thanksgiving.
Everybody's in a hurry.
I'm giving everybody a buy on that this year, but next year I don't want to see any Christmas stuff before Thanksgiving.
If you're looking into January, I'm just looking at the city site. It's pretty open in January. There's only meetings so far scheduled on the 14th, 19th, and 20th of January. So it doesn't look like there's a lot already on the.
I'm going to get my calendar. Excuse me a second.
I'll pretty much make any time work.
Do we want to try and keep a consistent day and time? I think
That's probably a good idea.
that would be helpful if we keep it, if Fridays work for people in the morning.
Okay.
That's fine for me.
I am my only problem. I'm going to be retiring at the end of January, so after that it won't be a problem. But Fridays is probably my worst day. Any other day is better than Friday.
Okay.
I'm sorry, did you mention a date? I had to go get my calendar.
Well, we were just discussing picking a mutually agreeable day and time and keep it consistent. Richard indicated that Fridays right now are not great for him, but I'll leave it up to you all.
I think Tuesdays, Wednesdays, or Thursdays are better to stay away from the weekends.
Okay.
Yeah, well,
Second that.
I think I agree with that.
Morning or afternoon?
And keep it in the mornings, or what do you think?
That's good for me.
AM's good for me.
Because I make a lot of my appointments in the afternoon, so I don't know how everybody else feels about that too.
That's fine with me.
Do you have a date, Barry, by chance?
Let's do, what about January 6, 7?
6 is fine.
Okay, let's do January 6 at 10.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Yep, that should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause I play pickleball at 7:30 to 9:30, so 10's perfect.
You can do some
Great.
reconnaissance
Anything
while
else
you're
we
there.
need to discuss? I'm glad everybody could, and we'll have to bring Dave back up to speed on all this. He had a knee replacement and he had some doctor's appointments.
You can watch on YouTube. They have they'll load these all up on YouTube for public
Oh,
consumption.
that's great. Well, we all have
Yeah.
to tell them that. Great. Anything else?
No,
All right. Thanks for everybody for
Thank you
joining
all.
in.
Stay
All right,
safe.
thanks.
Be
Have a
safe.
good weekend.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Happy holidays.
Yes, happy holidays.
Barry, happy holidays.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.